shipwreck camp, a settlement populated by convicts used to make the generators in the less moral construction sites. They were willing to help us if we were willing to make certain improvements. The construction team had arrived at the shipwreck camp, and so the trading depot was constructed. I made a request for, well, after they told us what they needed, I made a request for actually it wasn't at that time. But most of their requests required steel. At least at that time. And steel was not going to be running out. At least not for the foreseeable future. At least the supply of wood would no longer be a problem for us. As wood was not something that they were short of. It was steel that was a problem. And steel was what we had in abundance. Along with coal. Well, there was enough of an abundance to have a surplus ready. Seeing as it would take time for the wood to arrive, it was best to accommodate the shipwreck camp. And the child was not very accepting of the truth regarding a dead loved one. one of those from Hot Springs was a relative. The ship apparently was what transported the prisoners, and although there was food, I had my suspicions and decided that it was not worth the risk. The supplies that the scout group had were needed much sooner. So it was to Bligh's Folly with them. As for what was to follow, that would depend on where I thought they would be best sent. As Tesla City was a settlement, well, a failed settlement that had yet to be accounted for. Whatever crimes the prisoners, well, former prisoners, that made up the shipwreck camp settlement, they had more than served their punishments. So they should be treated as equals. Oh yes, and as for improvements, a construction team was sent to the middle part of the safe route in preparation for the wood that would be arriving. Wood that would be needed to complete it. And much of it will be arriving. Largely because improvements were made at a surprising rate as far as they were concerned. Even with the lower amount of workers, more coal was being gathered, well, That was how the estimations were then being used. Oh, and the care house was completed. Useful in case there's any overspill from the infirmary. And I had doubts that it would be happening only once. I would be a fool to believe otherwise. That's what I thought, and, well, you will find out. When it became time for a new law, it was decided that extra rations for the ill would be a good idea, considering that there was enough food to spare for that. Although that would be saved for when there was enough to make that worth the resources. Speaking of which, the wood had arrived. There was only one more stage of the safe route to complete, and then more food could be transported, with minimal risk to the ones transporting it. And by this point, the shipwreck camp had some ill people. I thought it best that they arrived here, rather than the sick being quarantined, as it would be unlikely that they would survive there with their limited medical facilities. And with the supplies arriving in Bligh's Folly, they were sent out to determine what happened to Tesla City, if there was as much left of it after the great storm as there was of Winterhome. At least with the care house, they could be kept alive until there was space for those in the infirmary.
Wrap up well. The frost is here. Get up, people. Our work won't wait.
More wood was needed, and not just for the safe route between Bligh's Folly and Hot Springs, other things would need it as well. Keep listening or reading depending on what you're using to find out. The construction team arrived at the last stage of the safe route. The scouts that didn't make it were buried. It required more wood, but it was only right to do so. And with that, the safe route between Bligh's Folly and Hot Springs was completed. The construction team was moved on to the children's mine. Because the safe route there would need to be built eventually. Every other day, food would be transported to Bligh's Folly. But that would not stop improvements being made. When the resources would allow for that. The children's mine was woefully neglected when it came to improvements. The shipwreck camp sent over some wood to help us out regarding that. As for the Scouts group, that one was on its way to deliver supplies that it had been able to uncover. Supplies that we would have need of. The scout group had arrived. There was no need for them to go back into the frozen wastes. The wood they had would be repurposed. And they would be reassigned to gathering coal. This would result in the improvements, the initial improvements for the children's mine to be completed. Coal would not be a problem for the foreseeable future. And with the... not again. Yes. This recording device could use some resurfacing. Possibly a replacement. But additional improvements could wait. Because the priority by this point was better housing. As even though there was a slight increase in temperature approaching, it would not last. Things seldom do in this environment. food was needed more than wood from hot springs, as it would be needed to sustain the extra rations for the ill, so that they recovered faster. Well, why not if the food could be spared? Besides, they knew by now that we delivered, and we respected their customs, even though we might not agree with them. The construction team stood by around the children's mine, so that when the safe route was completed, or rather when the safe route could be built, they would be ready to go to the individual stages of it. If it worked the same way as before, the children's mine apparently had problems with fairly organising medical treatment. Although I did not want to get involved in this, that the children should still organise themselves. I knew that they didn't take kindly to overreach. Developments were progressing quite well, and there was time to make additional developments before the temperature would drop even more. And then something else would happen.